Hi and welcome to this tutorial. Today we will be learning about the design principle of movement. To understand the concept of movement, you must first get rid of your ideas or preconceptions regarding what movement actually is. If you search up the word movement in your dictionary, it'll likely say something like this. Movement is the act of changing physical location or position. In design, movement refers to the way an artwork, such as an illustration, a drawing, or a logo, physically moves your eye to a particular part of it, to the focal point of the artwork. Something to be aware of in design is that movement and direction are actually the same thing, so they're synonymous with each other. An artist or designer finds ways to create direction in their work, to lead to the focal point. By creating direction in your work, you are essentially creating pathways for your eyes to guide you through the piece until it reaches the final destination. But how do you create direction in your work? Well, through artistic techniques.
They could be lines, different shapes, textures, and so on, like a big bold line framing the focus.
So that you fully grasp this concept, I'm going to show you a YouTube video where a graphic designer explains his specific choices in terms of creating direction in his work.
I want the viewer to look at the focal point. So for this one, I made sure to put a single face in the image because people love looking for faces. Beyond that, I have the large angles of the bird's wings creating straight lines pointing directly at the focal point. There's also a large bird flying in a vector that is straight aimed at the face. And then I use repetition. And repetition is a great way to lead an eye through the image. So I created a general sweeping formation, leading the eye from the middle right, down around the image, and back up towards the bird's face. And all of these choices were intentional, made to control the viewer's eye.
Hopefully now you fully understand the concept of movement and direction in design, and how you use specific artistic techniques such as lines, shapes and texture to achieve direction and movement in your designs. To complete your tutorial, we're now going to look through some examples of logos, designs and so on, and see what went wrong, what went right, and how they have incorporated direction into the design, and if it worked or not. Here we have a lovely example of a logo where the designer has creatively used elements of design, as I mentioned was important before, to create movement in the design, and we now have a focus on the main part of the design, the focal point. Now they've used this texture, this lovely texture around this world to really draw your eyes to it. Then you have the fairly bland name here. So you really are focusing on this textured world, and that was the intention of the designer. Okay, now we have a really bad example of a design where the viewer's eyes are torn from this side to that side to that side, and you really just don't know where you're supposed to be focusing. So the designer here has not really thought about the natural flow of the eye. Because naturally, without all these arrows, we would just look straight down and read this writing. But with all of these arrows pointing this way, we've already read this word and then we're looking over, off the edge of the page, then having to come back, then getting torn to this side, and it's all just very confusing, and we really just don't know where we're supposed to be looking. This logo is proof that a really simple design can be very eye-catching and can really achieve the effect desired by the designer. So this design has got a really simple belt, which is in the shape of a shepherd's staff, which is the main focus point, this shepherd, which actually leads you up and then directs you to read this writing. So it's a really good use of direction and movement in a design, as it draws you up and creates those lovely pathways through the design to the focal point. Now we're going to finish with an absolutely terrible design. We have a reindeer looking up here, we have an elephant looking up here, gazers going here, and then you have what seems to be the focus point, which is this lady here, and she's looking this way. Now, as you can see, this use of direction has been an absolute failed attempt by the designer, because what you essentially want to be doing in design is directing all down to one focus point. If you have multiple directions leading off away from the focus point, you're not going to achieve the balanced effect or the viewer looking at the focus point, which is always what you want to be doing. So you really need to make sure when you make a design that the gazes are looking down. So if someone has a gaze, you want to make sure it's looking toward the focus point. All of these should be focusing toward the woman rather than going away from the woman, because it has just created a really confusing design as the viewer does not know where they're supposed to be looking. Thank you very much for watching this tutorial, and I really hope you have a good understanding of movement and direction in design.